And also,
Sorry.
well, you all hear that? I guess it's in progress. And also, if you could please mute your microphones until the question and answer period, which we'll have at the end of the presentations. And that will help all of us to hear better. So we have two very interesting presentations today. George Corrett, owner and operator of Eco Quiet Lawn Care, is going to speak with us about what it takes to switch to all electric landscaping. And after George speaks, State Representative Michelle Socolo will tell us about a bill she's proposed to help fund the transition to low noise, low emission equipment for both cities and towns. George Corrett studied horticulture at UMass Amherst Stockbridge School of Agriculture before starting his company in 2014. At the time, he realized that there was a significant carbon footprint associated with landscaping technologies. And he saw electric landscaping as a valuable opportunity to reach environmentally conscious consumers. George started his business with one electric lawnmower and one homeowner Ryobi leaf blower. Fast forward 8 years, and his company services 12 towns and has a roster of 175 customers. Today, George will talk about why he went electric and offer tips on how you can move towards all electric landscaping. Then we will hear from State Representative Michelle Socolo. And after her presentation, we'll open up for questions. And now we'll turn this over to George.
All right, my name is George Corrett, and thankfully I've just got that whole intro, so we can get right to it. Next slide. Yeah, we can just go to the next one. They can look at that as a reference. So yeah, like I said, we were founded in 2014. Actually, though it's the same corporation, it started as George's Wicked Lawn and Garden, which is super cute, but not exactly telling people the vibe of my company. And when it comes down to it, a lot of people ask me different questions like, is it possible to do? Is it actually feasible? And I was doing it, 8 years ago with really, really weak equipment compared to now. And through a little know-how and some sacrifice, it's been profitable every year, even during the pandemic, which has been two of the hardest years to actually try to grow a business. And we were trying to scale at the same time, so you'd expect actually losses in that case. So I've been pretty happy about changing, and I actually want other people to change too. And if they don't want to do that too, I will always be ready to grow my business. So there's that. We use electric almost everything. There's a couple of things that aren't electric because they don't make them, like aerators. Obviously, the trucks aren't quite electric yet, but we actually pre-ordered some. So really what I wanted to do is make something that's a little less boutique than other electric companies and really tries to get to more of a common denominator, because I know some of my competitors are very, very expensive and use things like push mowers. So I really like what I do, and I really like that we're growing fast and spreading to all sorts of different towns. Next. So yeah, there's a couple of steps that you can go and do to make using electric a little easier. A lot of that really focuses around leaf blower use, because that's actually the thing that is the least efficient when it comes to actually using electricity. I have this one battery that's about a kilowatt in a leaf blower that uses about it's about 30 minutes of use at full blast. But in something like a weed whacker, I can go all day, or in a mower, 4 hours. So when you're using a gas to actually use to move a solid, which is leaves, it's pretty inefficient. So if you can do things like leave a little leaves in your garden beds during the fall, that will actually help insects. They'll actually make it easier. So you're doing the polish up and the really big heavy use of leaf blowers in the spring to just kind of polish up that last bit. And that's actually when you go and need it. It will help you out a lot. And also you can go and kind of design things around the leaf blower. If you want to have the perfect look, then don't go and put in bushes too close to each other, making a thicket, because then you're just going to be picking leaves out of bushes and really having a hard time with that loss of power. But you actually go do other things, like you do really nice upbranching of your bushes, which looks beautiful too. It's going to make things a lot easier. And that's what I like to do with all my clients, is just put that little extra effort into shrubbery and other things like that, keep it neat and maintained, and then it's not such a disaster. Then also what you can go and do is find places like leaf corrals, and that really eliminates the need for like a gas leaf sucker or to dispose of the leaves. Because if you keep leaves on site, one, you're not possibly moving invasive material, or you're not moving the material as far away. You're letting it decompose in a way that's actually pretty good for the environment, because you with a leaf corral, what it is a kind of fence structure that raises up the leaves so they actually get more oxygen. And so it actually decomposes faster and in a much nicer way. And then you get nice compost. Then you can do other things like reducing the maintained areas. I have a lot of people in larger lots, especially in Concord, that have these large yards, and sometimes they don't even use certain areas. And we're getting more and more people that are converting areas to wildlife, getting a nice little native strip in an area that's maybe hard to mow or something like that. And it provides less of a pain, bill wise, and also maintenance for us. And then it looks nicer than some area that is just like maybe a abused hillside where you have to weed whack the entire thing. Yeah. And that last part's more specific to going and not planting things like the hemlock, where which is basically dying due to the hemlock woolly adelgid. And another thing is to go and plant evergreens, because if you have a leaf blower that's less powerful and you have something that doesn't really drop its leaves as much, you're going to be a lot happier. I just actually came back from California, and I see out there's actually a lot of evergreens, and that's why out there electric is absolutely booming. And by planting more evergreens, one, you're going to have a nice looking landscape in the winter, and you're not going to go and have to deal with the huge deluge of leaves. All right, next. Okay, so now when purchasing your equipment, there's a really important thing you got to do, is you can't be indecisive. You want to go and scope out the platform that you're going to look, whether it's Still, whether it's Greenworks, whether it's Ego, and see all the tools they have, because you don't want to go out there and say, buy this kind of cheap Chinese knockoff, and that's the blower is okay for you, but then you have to buy a different battery system for this other tool you want, because you're going to have a mess of batteries. It's going to be very costly compared to going out and saying, all right, Ego has the leaf blower I want to use, the size of chainsaw that I want to use. So now I can buy all these batteries together and have less of a cost. Also, say if you have your neighbors around you and they also have similar needs, then you can maybe buy together and have those batteries be used together, because batteries age over a time too. It's not that much, but you do see a decline. So if you have a 20-year-old lithium ion battery, it's not going to be as good. It's better to use those life cycles earlier on. And if you have more people using all those life cycles, it's going to actually end up better. Yeah. And then also, for a little bit of a tip for commercial users, the best way to do it is to get loans on things because big upfront costs are scary. But if you actually just move it over a longer period, then you can actually gain the benefit of having that lower gas price actually help you out. Like we use a lot of batteries in the fall, but 1 second, scam call, of course. We use a lot of batteries in the fall, but our electric bill never really gets above $300. And so if you look at gas operators, it's much, much more. And actually we compared to our last tenant, which was a gas operator, and his electric bill was maybe like $100 lower than us. So you can save a lot of money, but you need to go and be intelligent and extend that cost over a period. All right, next. Yeah, the next thing to do is you want to be really careful with this when you're actually bringing this up to the landscaper. You probably know about a lot of things happening in Lexington. It is getting very contentious. And so we don't want to go and seem like the enemy. And thankfully, I think Lexington has been a lot more progressive with this and talking about assisting landscapers, doing a slow phase out. Because I know I got involved with things in Newton and they just put an all-out ban, and it was very, very political, very black and white, and they didn't want to do it. And I knew landscapers out there that didn't want to do it just on the principle. And so we want to avoid those high conflict ways of doing things. So, you know, what I think you want to do is do it in a way just saying, okay, we want to help you. Maybe, you know, let them borrow a piece of equipment or just get their mind going. We want to boil the frog slowly rather than going out there and just, you know, for lack of a word, better word, kind of carrying on them, and then they will not want to do it. Because landscapers, we're all kind of tough people and everything, and we don't like to be told what to do. So this is a hard one because we do want to go and promote this next generation of eco-friendly equipment, but we don't want to go and set ourselves back. So they're just using their old equipment, trying to repair it for years and years as it produces more and more smog. So just be kind to other peoples. And like I said, remember, Rome was not built in one day. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, George. And there will be time at the end to ask questions. Now I'd like to introduce Michelle Sicolo, who is our state representative for the town of Lexington and Woburn. And when I sat down to write a brief introduction for her, I quickly realized how difficult it would be to do justice for all of the state and local work that she has done over the last 20 years, and still have time for her to speak today. So I'd just like to call out the tireless work that she's done through the years, most recently as our state representative, on issues related to sustainability, housing, equity, transportation, and smart growth land use. Today, Representative Sicolo will talk about the bill that she has proposed to help both municipalities and private landscaping companies transition to all electrical equipment.
Thank you, Beth.
Over.
Thank you, Beth. That was such a kind introduction. I'm thrilled to be with you all today. This is an important issue, and I know everyone is keenly aware of how controversial it's become within the community, but also how important it is. So I'll just step back a moment and tell you that I've been interested and involved in the issue of the leaf blowers since I was serving on the select board prior to being elected state representative, and I served as the liaison to the noise committee. And that was quite a few years ago when the noise committee began thinking about the need to update the bylaw. And advance the concerns about noise in particular. But the more we dug into it and learned about it, the more we began to understand that this is also a social equity issue. The two-stroke motors in leaf blowers are very carcinogen. They're very dangerous to public health, and it's often our low-wage workers, our minority and immigrant residents among us that do the jobs in landscaping our yards, and it's very great concern that more Black and brown people are exposed to the fumes and the noise, which causes significant hearing damage. So I really became interested at that time, and yet I was also concerned about the issue related to small businesses. We don't want to put anybody out of business. We also, again, these small businesses are often immigrants and our lowest wage workers. Even the small business, even business owners are barely getting by running seasonal businesses that don't have work in the winter, right? So clearly this is something that we had to tread forward carefully to try to figure out how to make a change that wouldn't be negative and impactful to the businesses. So when I got to the legislature, my first session, I filed the bill that would create a grant program to help transition. And I'm now in my second session in the legislature. The bill went to study last session, but this session I refiled it, and it is Bill H868. And we'll put in the chat a link to that. I actually should also call out that my aide, Abby Kutrumbis, is here, and she's just amazing. And I think she probably could put the link to the bill directly in the chat. But this session, the bill had a hearing in front of the Environmental Committee and was reported out favorably, which is a huge step forward. And there have been some other really interesting developments on the bill and sort of people's awareness about this issue and level of interest. Just to describe a little bit more clearly what the bill does, it actually asks the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs to create a grant program to assist cities and towns in transitioning their equipment to low emissions, low noise equipment, and to create a low interest loan program for the small businesses. So it does those two things. And it's not very prescriptive in terms of how much money will be set aside, because the executive office has a number of bond opportunities that if it really wanted to run this program, it would have the capacity to create the program within the existing bond authorizations, in my view. That doesn't mean I'm not also looking at ways to try to get this into budgets, and I'll be looking to see if I can get this bill to move within the next allocation of ARPA funding, the federal money that Massachusetts is allocating, the American Rescue Plan money. I will look to see if we can get the bill moving with an actual appropriation that doesn't have to be bonded funds in either that venue, through that avenue, or through the state budget this year. But I'm really pleased. One of the things that I did as well is write into the administration when it was developing its climate plan, suggesting that a program of this sort be created. And just a couple of days ago, the Mass Save program, which is regulated by the Department of Public Utilities, released its updated 350-page plan, which was approved by the DPU. And in that plan, they reference the desire to create incentives for residents to convert their equipment, so actual rebates. And I'm setting up a meeting with a woman at the Department of Public Utilities that runs that program. Actually, she's at DOER, the Department of Energy Resources. So I'm hopefully working with her to make sure that that program will extend to commercial business owners, because I think with what's going on in many communities, it's not just about, I think transitioning for residents is a lot easier. The equipment's a little bit less expensive. We don't use the equipment as much, potentially. Many of us do have landscapers that have to have commercial grade equipment, which is far more expensive. So I'll be working with them to try to advance that rebate program to make sure that the private sector commercial business operators will have access to it. So that's it in a nutshell. It is, I think, vitally important that we, for our air quality, for our, to reduce the toxic fumes that are being released, for worker safety, for the noise and disruption that causes stress and anxiety levels to rise. I think for all these reasons, we're on the right track and we need to move forward with these types of things. So thank you for having me today. I'm always thrilled to come and visit with the mothers out front anytime. I'd come every week if I could, if I didn't have a conflict, but just say the word and whenever you want me to come talk about something else.
Great. Thank you so much, Michelle. And so that's it for the presentations today. And we're going to move into question and answer period. And usually we stop right at 12:30, but both George and Michelle have offered to stay for a few minutes beyond 12:30, which is great. But for those of you who might need to jump off right at 12:30, I just want to thank you for coming today. And also encourage you to come to our next Actionaire, which is on March 10th. And we'll be offering an update on clean heat efforts in Lexington. And as always, maybe, Mandy, could you put up the third slide? There's a couple of links on the third slide. Just going to say, as always, if you're interested in learning more about Mothers Out Front, please email us at info.ma.lexington@mothersoutfront. And there's also a link to the flyer that George generated for all of you, and it's tips for electric landscaping. And I think that's also going to be in the chat as well. And Michelle, you were going to have something in the chat, a link for your bill. Great. So let's move into questions. And you'll need to unmute your microphone. Anybody have a question for either Michelle or George?
I have a question, a couple of questions actually. George, you mentioned approaching landscapers by saying, well, this will save you time. I've been active in Cambridge.
Somebody needs to mute their thing.
Okay.
Might be Elaine.
The landscapers, needless to say, are very, very, very much opposed, and they all say it will take a lot more time. It will cost a whole lot more money. So how do you pitch that it's going to save time?
Well, so, you know, there's no getting around that. Going and using a leaf blower, a less powerful leaf blower during the fall does take more time. But I just don't think there's a huge associated cost with that. Like I said, I've been operating a business profitably, and I've actually found that sometimes I undercut other landscapers, and I've actually been trying to raise my price a little bit so I can raise my wages and other things like that. So it's not that bad. And, you know, fall cleanups is one of the most profitable times for me. So I think what they need to use more maybe is, like, you want to encourage them to use this on like smaller properties. You want to encourage them to use leaf plows, and then say, hey, if you go electric, then you can use this leaf disposal site here. Like, maybe offer that as kind of a little bit of a cookie, so to say. Like, I will build you a leaf corral, and so now you don't have to waste all the time for disposal.
I see.
Okay. You know, and so that's the thing. Like, it does take more time. It is harder. I've had some people go and say to me, let's say like, oh, you know, I didn't know electric was harder to do. It's like, yeah, using a leaf blower that's less powerful and more heavy is definitely harder. But if you offer these other strategies that I was talking about, like offer to pay them to upbranch your bushes so they can go blow through without having to have a red max with 1,000 CFM. Say, hey, I'll tolerate a little bit of leaves in the bed so the insects can stay there. And so they don't have this huge time crunch during the fall that it's incredibly stressful time. So that's one thing too. When you're telling them, hey, I'm going to take away your nice, powerful leaf blower, but I'm not going to change my expectations or change the strategy of what we're doing here, I can see why they're definitely triggered by that. So that's a thing. It's like, you have to make a compromise somewhere.
Yeah.
And if you make the compromise of saying, hey, you can do on-site leaf disposal, well, that might be really removing a lot of cost for them. And then it's a negotiation versus being punitive. And that's the thing too. I saw this other thing in the chat. If we throw around the ban word about everything, we're gonna get a bad reaction. And if we use that sparingly and also offer to help, like Michelle did a great job of trying to get this bill passed because it's offering to help. There's
Right.
too much adversarial behavior
Mhm.
in this conversation, and it
Mhm.
doesn't work.
Yeah.
It's just like the war on drugs on some level. If you overdo this and just try to ban everything, it does not work.
Right, right, okay.
You
Well,
have to help too.
So go ahead. I just want to step in because I noticed a message from Michelle that you have to leave right at 12:30. So I'm sorry to cut off. It looks like Virginia had a couple of other questions. If you could hold those, are you able to stay after 12:30? Okay, great. Anybody have questions for Michelle before she needs to leave?
You guys are too easy on me.
I'll give you one.
Go for it.
So would these loan programs only be applicable to people that are converting from electric or people that are currently operating electric?
I would imagine converting, but I don't believe the regulations at the Mass Save program have been written yet. I think they just have a plan to provide rebates, and the details, I think, are still being developed. That's one of the reasons why I'm looking to meet with the folks managing this program to see if I can influence it.
Like, I definitely don't need any more equipment, so I wouldn't be worried about it, but I'd just say, you know, the early adopters too, you don't want to necessarily penalize them
Maybe
from,
the way to make it retroactive for 6 months or something. I'm not sure,
yeah.
but I'll certainly raise that with them.
Any other questions for Michelle? I guess a question I have is, what is the best way that we can show support for you in the bill?
Thank you. That's a great question. I think at this point, writing to leadership is helpful. You know, I think that we'll likely see an environmental bill that'll be developed by Chair Roy, even though he's the Telecommunications, Utilities, and Energy Chair. He's looking to do something more broad. And our chair of the Environmental Committee has just stepped down for a private sector job. So writing to the chair and writing to Speaker Mariano, asking him to move this bill to the floor. And the chair of Ways and Means, Aaron Michaelwitz, would be extremely helpful in referencing the bill and describing how important it is for worker safety, because it is an environmental justice issue, but also the fact that communities are making moves to reduce the availability of gas-powered equipment for a variety of reasons. And, you know, you could describe what's happening in Lexington and say that we want to make sure that we're not leaving our small businesses out in the cold as we try to make this transition to a cleaner, greener future. That would be great. I mean, and certainly please copy me if you're sending something in. And if you're not sure who to send it to, check in with us later and we can give you those names and the email addresses. But that would be super helpful. And maybe Abby can throw those addresses in the chat as we speak and their titles so that people will have it. Because I think that would be incredibly helpful.
Good, thank you.
Thanks for asking that question. And thanks again for having me. I wish I could stay, but I'll be back sometime in the future.
Great. Thank you so much for making the time to come today.
My pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye. So any other questions for George?
George, can you talk about what a leaf corral is? I assume you're talking about homeowners making a leaf corral somewhere in their property.
Yeah, so a leaf corral is basically kind of a raised structure that is just sometimes as simple as 4 posts and some chicken wire. It just basically gives you an area, a raised area where you can put leaves so they can decompose faster. And that allows you to spare the cost of getting rid of leaves. I know the closest disposal site for you guys, I think is Wagon Wheel, and it's like $150 per a dump of like 9 yards, which, you know, you get a lot of leaves. You get one oak lot, you might fill up your dump truck. So that could be a significant carrot to offer your landscaper, or just you don't have to fill up all those, you know, bags of leaves, which seem awful to me when I see people do that. I'm like, wow, there's like 120 of those. And so, yeah, it's just easier in general. And it, yet again, removes the need to, you know, consume fossil fuels to get rid of leaves by doing on-site disposal. And you'd be surprised on how many leaves you can actually put in there. We made a small leaf corral on a property that's like 2 or so acres. I think it was like 12 by 12 or something like that. And half the leaves fit in there. That's a lot of leaves. And yeah, sometimes I stamp them down a little bit and everything. But back in the day when I didn't even have any leaf sucker or anything like that, I really got a lot out of that. And I know some small Lexington yards could definitely put all of their leaf refuse into one of those. I wish I had a picture of it. The thing is not fancy looking at all and didn't take very much time to put in, but they can be very effective.
I'm just looking at thank you, George, and I'm looking at the chat here, and Christy from Mothers Out Front is wanting to remind everybody that this issue is actually on the ballot on March 7th. So if you're a Lexington resident, please vote. Question 1 is asking to repeal Article 10, which was passed last year by the town meeting. And then there was a question by Elaine saying, why are leaf blowers necessary during the summer lawn care?
I mean, I guess anything is like feasible. Like we could use brooms and stuff like that, but it just really comes down to it, the economics of going and operating a seasonal business when you need to make decent margins in the summer. You know, time is really, really short. For every hour of payroll, if you're like, I pay my guys during the winter and there's not that much stuff, especially with no snow. Every minute we have out there is like really a minute and a half of cost because I got to pay them during the winter. So I'd say that it's just too slow to go out there with a broom. I mean, if I have clients that say, hey, just don't bother, and I'll do that. But if you want me out there with a broom, it's gonna cost you a lot of money. So that's saying, if you're willing to pay for it, anything's possible if you shove money into somebody's face. But they're going to ask for a lot more money, or if it doesn't fit the business model because the employees might be confused, they're not really going to do it. And really why it's necessary is people expect clean surfaces, and it's, you know, it's just too much time. You know, like for a small yard, you could be there for maybe 10 minutes, but at the same time, you're going to have 10 minutes of driving in between clients, the gas used in between that. There's other costs associated with it. So, you know, sometimes I have people say, oh, why was that visit $50? And I'm like, well, there's a lot more going on than just getting to your yard and mowing a lawn.
I wonder if I could just jump in on that as well. I do think that there's just a substantial need to educate homeowners and to have those conversations with you know, landscapers, because again, it's a matter of, you know, what do you expect and what do you want from your lawn care, right? So if more people understand that it's actually detrimental to remove leaves from your property, then maybe they would make different choices. I think there's just a lack of education and a lack of understanding for a lot of people. And so I think, you know, the more that we can share that information within our communities, hopefully that can help turn the tide as well.
Yeah, I might just add along those lines of what Christy just said, is I live in a condo development. We've got 13 duplexes on each side of the street. and they have a contractor come in, and it's this horrible noise goes on for hours. But my point is, we do something which we're not really supposed to do. But anyway, we actually block off our side yard and backyard with signs saying, please don't go in here, we'll take care of it. And although they're supposed to do the work, they respect that and they leave it alone. What's interesting is when you look at our yard compared to our neighbors' yards, which are all constructed about the same, we have just so much more wildlife, so many more birds. And in particular, we have toads, we have salamanders. These guys would not be there if they were blitzed every week. They just wouldn't be there. So it's very easy. Once in a while, I just rake when you get a lot of leaves. I just take with a rake just to rake up the big bulk on the top, but I leave a lot on the ground. And it's great, it's fine. It looks nice. It's a nice natural area. People need to know that.
Any other questions for George?
Question, George, have you worked at all with municipalities? Here in Cambridge, there's this, and of course they have much larger properties they need to look after. They say, sorry, we've only got one choice. And that's gas. Now we last tried this 3 years ago. I don't know how the technology has changed since then. But that's a real hurdle because, it's awfully hypocritical to tell a town the commercial landscapers can't do it and the residential owners can't do it, but the town can. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, that does look really bad. It's something that has been brought up quite a lot when people go out and say, oh, the town's going to do it. Because yet again, it's the government regulating you and then saying, but we're not going to do the thing we're forcing you to do. It's real bad. Especially because a lot of landscapers are kind of conservatives in the first place. So you have a uphill battle, and now any hypocrisy is just not going to work. I would say, actually, the place where I founded my company, Concord, they actually recently converted to using electric lawnmowers. And maybe the thing to do is to get the towns to convert to that first, again, get the ball rolling, and then have them go maybe do stuff in the summer. Just try to get something rolling that is more attainable in their minds. Just like a lot of the landscapers are going in, they're the same type of people. You want to go and just start the ball rolling. And then when they're like, wow, I don't have to deal with this, starting up this 2-stroke weed whacker all the time. This is actually pretty nice. They're going to see the benefits of it. And then little bit by little bit, they'll just want to not deal with it, because every once in a while dealing with a gas motor, if you're used to electric, is actually pretty obnoxious.
Right. Okay.
So, and also, yet again, they have bigger places in Cambridge, on-site disposal is a huge difference, because one thing we do with our larger lots is we use something called a leaf plow, which goes on a 0-turn mower and just pushes like a 400-pound pile of leaves. And you can just find a little corner of a place and just ram an enormous amount of leaves in there. And that is a huge difference. And you can use an electric lawnmower to go and do it too. You don't have to be electric, because a lot of the engines are 4-strokes and they're not as detrimental. But that way you can really do things all electric and be very, very competitive.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good to know, because we do have parks generally have land that is not cultivated, that you could stick weeds on fairly easily. Okay.
Yeah, the leaf plow, if they're not using it, they should. Because if they're using a bunch of red maxes too to go and do everything, it's actually less efficient. Like I can bump out yards pretty quickly. It's just I need to have a yard be designed like this and keep this in mind.
Okay.
So I'm seeing a hand raised, David Polak. I don't know if I'm pronouncing your last name right. I see that you have a question. You need to unmute.
It's David Pollock.
Pollock.
Thanks anyway. I use a mulching lawnmower. I have a little cabin in Vermont, and I use it not only to mulch grass, but also to mulch leaves. I was wondering if the electric, and it's a old-fashioned two-stroke engine, terrible machine, noisy and polluting, but it does leave all the debris on the in very small pieces, obviously, on the lawn, and the lawn does fine. Is there anything you could say about mulching?
Yeah, so for a while too, because some of the mowers weren't good enough, I, couldn't do mulching. Thankfully, we actually started to buy a lot of Oregon push mowers, and they are really, really powerful. They're actually like gas power equivalent. They use battery a little bit faster, but man, they mulch up things really nicely. So I can finally offer that again. And yeah, yet again, it's all about keeping that material on there. Now, if you have like an oak lot, that's probably not the best thing to do. You probably want to remove it because they have something called a waxy cuticle on the leaves, which kind of create a low oxygen environment. Ripping them up is better, but it still isn't the best thing to mulch. Things like beech leaves, things like maple leaves, they grind up beautifully. And even if you have a lot of them, sometimes what we do is we clear out beds, grind up the leaves, and then just blow them directly back in and create the mulch. And then we're barely moving leaves, just moving them out and then back in.
So is it more expensive to use a mulching lawnmower, or and are there other downsides other than the oak leaves, and I think you may have said beech leaves?
No, beech leaves are good.
Okay.
The oak leaves are really the only concern, just because of how thick and waxy they are. I mean, also, I think like if you're doing stuff with ginkgo biloba, it's not, those are really nasty leaves. You want to get rid of those, but not many people have them. Yeah, I mean, I would just say that, it can use a battery a little bit faster. So it's hard to do maybe on really, really large lots, but for a smaller property, especially in Lexington, it's not bad at all. You just got to get the right mower. You don't want to go with the cheapest electric one. You want to get a very powerful electric mower. Like I think Ego has a dual blade mower now. That'll probably do well. Oregon makes one that's really powerful, but they discontinued it, and that's what I use. It's really, really good. This thing weighs like 200 pounds, so it's ridiculous for a 21-inch mower. So yeah, it's just about picking a lawnmower that has enough power to do it. And like say a Greenworks 40 volt, you're not gonna have a good time. Greenworks 82, sure. So it's a type of thing, I think we need more education on the tools, because I know one of the reason a lot of commercial providers are probably a little antsy. If you go to the people that are actually selling these, they don't know like anything. They'll give you marketing material from the actual corporations that build them, and it's not true at all. I had one corporation, not to be named, that I was actually a product tester for, said if anybody asked, say voltage is like horsepower, and I'm like, that's not how things work at all. Like it's very easy math behind this to say that's not true. Like, a taser is thousands of volts. It's not going to move many leaves.
George, I think there's a question in the chat. Ben, do you want to ask your question? Well, the question is, I've heard a lot of people being concerned about leaves and ticks living in the leaves. How do you address the tick situation if you decide to keep the leaves in your yard?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would kind of keep the leaves in areas like garden beds or other areas that aren't really just, you're not running around in. Like that's what I usually do is I either kick them into a little wooded area near there or put them in a leaf corral. If I'm leaving the leaves, I usually get rid of them in the if I'm leaving the leaves in the bed, I usually get rid of them in the spring. So they're only there for a short period of time. And then if you're maintaining your lawn well and mowing it, then I haven't really seen many people have this problem. Another thing you could do is mow your grass a little bit lower in the fall when there might be more tick activity because a little bit more moisture. So that's what I usually do. But yeah, like I haven't had too much problems with the more maintained areas like that, especially in Lexington. And you know, I'm a tick magnet, so usually I know when things are pretty bad.
So we've actually reached the end of our time today, but thank you so much. George, a lot of things to think about, a lot of useful information, and actually very exciting to be moving in this direction.
Mhm.
I just want to thank everybody for coming and for your time, George, today. And please
you.
come back next month on March 10th for our next Action Air. Take care.
Thank you very much.
Bye.